How did the Class 66 become the backbone of the freight industry? How much did they cost to build? Why were they greeted with such disdain by enthusiasts when they first arrived? How heavy are they? How fast can they go? How many corners of the globe can you find them in? And why on earth are they called sheds? This video aims to answer all of those questions and more as we bring you 66 facts about the Class 66. First, let's look at the origins of the class. They are a development of the Class 59 locomotive design. The Class 59s were built from as far back as 1985. 15 members of this particular class were built in total for 3 different operators within the UK. They were designed and assembled by the Locomotive division of General Motors. So how did we go from the 59s to the 66s? The answer lies in the privatisation of British Rail in the 1990s. A company called Wisconsin Central Transportation Systems, who owned a consortium called North-South Rail, purchased and merged a number of newly privatised UK rail companies, owning as much as 93% of the UK's freight operations. It's this entity, which went on to become known as the English, Welsh and Scottish Railway, that placed the first orders of the Class 66 fleet in the spring of 1996. In one of the biggest British locomotive orders since the days of steam, 250 units were ordered by the EWS. This order set the company back by a whopping £375 million, and in their eyes, it was worth every penny. Like the Class 59s, they would all be built at the EMD's workshops in London, Ontario, Canada. They were built with greater efficiency, reliability, and increased power all in mind. To that end, let's look at some more details of the spec of the class. To start with, their power output reaches 3,300 brake horsepower. They tip the scales at just shy of 130 tonnes in weight. They have a fuel capacity of 6,400 litres. The top speed of this original batch is 75 miles per hour. Later variations and orders of the design would have slower speeds but greater haulage capacity. We'll cover those variations later in the video. They were built to a specification of a guarantee of 95% availability, the hope being that they would only suffer a failure after a minimum of 180 days of service. It was also hoped that they would cover in the region of 1.6 million kilometres in between any major rebuilds, or roughly 18 years of service on the rails. 5 of the locomotives were given special modifications for banking duties over the famous Lickey Incline, with the knuckle coupler able to be remotely released from the cab as the locomotive reaches the summit. 15 of the locomotives were also fitted with RETB signalling equipment, specifically for working in northern Scotland and on RETB fitted branch lines. Perhaps their most celebrated feature was their steerable bogies. They became the first locomotives to be fitted with a high traction radial bogie, which steered the wheels onto a curve to reduce the force applied on them, with the aim of reducing wear and improving ride quality. Originally, it was expected that the fleet would actually be labelled as a Class 61. The Class 66 designation was originally thought to be given to another locomotive design. That locomotive design is in fact what we know today as the Class 67. But, settling on the 66 designation, the first completed locomotives were ready by 1998. This was the fastest ever turnaround time for a new locomotive design by General Motors. Number 66001 was shipped and delivered to Immingham Docks on April the 18th, 1998, undergoing mainline testing soon after arrival. The next set of completed locomotives were delivered to Newport Docks each month until the first order was completed by December of 2001. No sooner had they been unloaded before almost all 250 locomotives were immediately pressed into revenue-earning service, often leaving under their own power straight from the docks to their new home depots. In total, counting all the orders from all freight operating companies since their inception, 480 members of the class were built for initial UK use. However, thanks to additional orders from mainland Europe, the total number of the class and its various subclasses is actually in the region of over 650 completed locomotives. As we hinted at during the intro for this video, their arrival wasn't initially met with great optimism. The the initial period of their introduction was rather unceremoniously dubbed the Red Death by enthusiasts due to the vast amount of classic classes of diesel locomotives that they replaced. They've also earned a couple of other nicknames, such as Ying Yings due to the sound of their engines, and perhaps the most commonly used term, sheds. Accounts vary as to where the shed nickname arose. Some say that they look like garden sheds. Others say that they are as common as a garden shed. You could argue that both are right. Drivers have also previously criticised the interior of the cabs, with loud noise levels and poor air conditioning cited as some of their less favourable traits. Though over the years, operators have reportedly made efforts to improve some of these issues. Are you a Class 66 driver? Let me know in the comments, as we'd love to get your thoughts on this topic. While EWS were the original proprietors of the locomotives, other freight operating companies soon followed suit. Freightliner were the next company to get in on the act, ordering an initial batch of 5 locomotives, duly christened as a 66/5 class. 66501 arrived at Newport Docks in July 1999. Subsequent orders since the late 90s have seen the Freightliner 66/5s grow exponentially, and an initial batch of 66/6 locomotives were also ordered by Freightliner, which had a different gear ratio, allowing for some heavier haulage duties. At the time of making this video, Freightliner's portfolio includes over 100 members of the class, with some of them being exported for work with some of their subsidiary companies in mainland Europe. In addition to the 66/5 and 6 models, a 66/9 variation was also ordered by Freightliner in the early 2000s. This version of the class was a lower emission variant. The 66s quickly built up a reputation as a game changer for the whole freight industry, and it wasn't long before GB Rail Freight also entered the picture. Their order, designated as a Class 66/7, had the same gearing as the 66/6 locomotives and arrived in April of 2000. More orders followed, including a similar variation to the 66/9s previously used by Freightliner. These locomotives went on to work on infrastructure contracts for the entity now known as Transport for London. Direct Rail Services were the next company to get their grubby mitts on members of the fleet. Their first order was placed in 2002, delivered in 2003, and these 10 locomotives were given the 66/4 designation. Like EWS, DRS needed to replace some of their ageing fleet of classic types of diesel locomotives, such as the Class 20s and Class 47s, among others. Further orders of the Class 66 followed in 2006 and 2007, covering a variety of duties including Anglo-Scottish workings, intermodal workings, and nuclear flask trains. Due to the changing of emission regulations, all 20 of DRS's first order of the class have since been returned and redistributed to other operators. They have, however, added some 66/3 units to their books. This order of 5 locomotives, originally ordered by the now defunct Fast Line Freight Company in 2008, were primarily used on coal trains from Hatfield Colliery. Like Fast Line Freight, another now defunct company called Advenza Freight once owned a small batch of 4 members of the class. These originated from the early DRS orders that were returned to a leasing company. These locomotives were numbered from 66841 to 66844. When Advenza Rail went bust, other operators stepped in to take on their scrap and cement flow train contracts, and of course some of their locomotive fleet. This is when Colas Rail entered the picture. Those 66s, 2 of which had also been leased to GBRF, were joined by another ex-DRS locomotive in 66410, which was renumbered as 66845. In the end, an agreement was reached to lease these 5 locomotives to GBRF. Instead, Colas Rail reached an agreement with Freightliner to purchase 5 replacement members of the class from them. These were renumbered from 66846 to 66850. At this point, I'm starting to get confused between all the different renumberings of the different companies, but we'll press on. Let's look at the origins of the locomotive's workings across Europe. With the success of the class in Great Britain, interest from other nations soon followed. A German company, Hyphen and Gutenberger, had previously operated some Class 59 locomotives. They placed the first non-UK order for the first 2 Class 66 locomotives from EMD. This was followed by an order from a Swedish company, TGOJ Traffic, and many more orders thereafter across the continent. Today, a version of the Class 66 can be found working in nations like France, the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg and Poland. Further improvements and variations of the class were made on the continent. A new equivalent, named as a Class 77, was modified by EMD for heavier European haulage and lower emissions, among other improvements. Another new variant had previously been in development, named as a Class 66 EU. However, this project was cancelled in 2011 as it was abandoned for an alternative concept. The 66 design has also made its way to other corners of the globe, including Africa and the Middle East. Egyptian National Railways own around 40 members of the class, which primarily work on passenger duties as opposed to freight. A small number of the class also operate on the Trans-Gabon Railway, also on passenger workings, and were dispatched between 2010 and 2011. Let's now return to the UK and back to their EWS routes. EWS was purchased by Deutsche Bahn in 2007. In 2009, EWS was rebranded as DB Schenker. Then in 2016, they were rebranded again as DB Cargo UK. Although some locomotives have since been sold on or exported abroad, most of the original examples of the class are still in operation with them to this day, some of them still wearing their vintage EWS livery. With the first era of orders concluding across the various companies around 2008, a newer batch were also built between 2014 and 2015 as part of an order by GBRF. These 7 locomotives were the final scratch-built order for the British market. This order also came at a pretty penny for GBRF at a cost of around £50 million. The final locomotive, 66779, would be unveiled at the National Railway Museum in York, given a special British Railways green livery, and was named Evening Star, pictured along with its namesake steam equivalent Class 9F, which of course was the last steam locomotive to be built by British Railways in the 1960s. The locomotive will also be offered to the National Collection upon its retirement in the coming decades, effectively securing the first preservation deal of its kind for the class. Many other members of the class have also been given names across the different companies. These range from the Biffa liveried Flying Dustman to football clubs such as Huddersfield Town and Peterborough United, to the likes of Captain Sir Tom Moore. The Flying Dustman was a name given to locomotive number 66783 in a competition by the staff at Biffa. I think we can all guess where the inspiration for that particular name may have come from. Despite the stir that they caused on arrival, the 66s today are far more popular with enthusiasts. In addition to their freight duties, some of them are called upon each year for mainline railtour passenger workings, and some have even guest starred in Heritage Railway diesel galas. The vast majority of each version of the class is still in working order today, though there have been some unfortunate casualties along the way. In 2001, 66521 was involved in the Great Heck rail crash near Selby in North Yorkshire, colliding with a Class 91 locomotive and its passenger train. The drivers of both trains sadly passed away, with 10 deaths in total and over 80 people seriously injured. The driver of that Class 66, Steve Dunn, is remembered via a nameplate on locomotive number 66526. His son later went on to become a train driver. In 2010, 66048 derailed at Carbridge during snowy weather in the Scottish Highlands, subsequently sliding down an embankment and injuring the 2 crew members. The shell of the locomotive would rest at Longport Depot in Staffordshire. In 2012, 66734 derailed at Loch Treeg, also in Scotland. Due to its position and environmental risks in the potential recovery process, the locomotive was sadly cut up on site, with its parts being recycled as spares. Happily, the number 66734 has actually been reused. It has been used on GBRF's 100th ordered Class 66 locomotive, adorning the name of Platinum Jubilee. There have been other collisions and derailments over the years, but thankfully in most cases only minor injuries at worst have occurred, with the locomotives having been tended to and pressed back into service. So, what does the future hold for the Class 66s? A clue to their fate was recently revealed, with various rail news outlets reporting the arrival of the new Class 99 bi-mode locomotives. 30 of these have been ordered initially by GBRF, and they will gradually displace some of their current Class 66 fleet. However, many of the 66s should continue their career on the rails for a good while yet. Some locomotives have already been brought over from Europe and refitted to UK specifications. In early 2023, GBRF announced a new leasing agreement with a European operator to bring 11 Class 77 and Class 66 locomotives to Britain to expand their operations. With emission reductions in mind, many locomotives across the various companies could be converted with similar modifications to the 66/9 series ordered by Freightliner. One such locomotive has already received a green makeover, and not just aesthetically. 66004 is fueled by hydro-treated vegetable oil. Tests have shown that they can create reduction in emissions by up to 90%. One company is even working on a steam-based electric solution. Steamology, a company based in Hampshire, has received a government grant to further develop their water-to-water based solution. Could the 66s really spearhead a new age of steam? They're also set to play a key role in the delivery of the mammoth HS2 project. One locomotive, 66796, has been renamed as the Green Progressor. It's been given a livery to match, and it will help transport construction materials to the various HS2 depots along the proposed routes. It's also hoped that some examples of the class will be preserved on heritage lines. Rumour has it that inquiries have already been made by prospective buyers into the likes of 66001 and 66002. More inquiries are sure to follow in the coming years as the class continue to prove their worth on Britain's railways. For more information and further reading on the Class 66, you can find links to a number of sources researched as part of the making of this video in the description. I hope you enjoyed this video featuring 66 facts about the Class 66. If you found it interesting, please hit the thumbs up button, leave a comment, and subscribe for more rail-based content just like this. Check out these videos on the YouTube end card and hit the notification bell to catch new content as soon as it lands. We'll see you in the next video.